Today we're going to be looking at the hallmarks of a bad player. Now if you do any of these things on this list, there's a very likely chance that you might just suck at Yu-Gi-Oh! Now of course each thing should be taken with a pinch of salt and understand that there is a degree of context to everything in this list. So keep that in mind before you get angry and comment saying, "But I do that and I'm a great duelist." I'm sure you are. That's why you're watching a video about why you might be bad, right? Anyway, let me know if you think there's anything missing, tell me what you think some of the bad signs are, and enjoy. For number 10 we have just poor dueling etiquette in general. Please make sure that if you search your deck, you let your opponent cut your deck. If your opponent offers for you to cut the deck, then cut it. Okay, just be a grown adult. You don't need to like draw from your deck and then throw your card into the air and scream, "Draw!" Okay, please. Just before you have any kind of social interaction at locals or when you're dueling, just ask yourself, would this happen in the anime? If the answer is yes, you probably need to just like calm down and just not do it, okay? We're grown adults here. It's cardboard. Hygiene, that kind of stuff, you know, if you're going to be spending a full day at locals, maybe just have a shower before you leave. And just the final part for this little section, cringy duel apps. I particularly hate this. If you have like a little life point thing and it's just on max volume and you can hear it from the other side of the room going, like please just, can we just use pen and paper or something? Like, I'd rather just like memorize the life points at that point. I don't want to have to listen to like literal anime duel apps going off in the background because you attacked me with a Trickstar Candina. Now for number 9 we have being over animated or just generally quite revealing in their plays. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. Have you ever seen someone just like draw their 5th card for turn and then they go to start their plays and they just sigh and they're like, "Ugh, I drew badly," or whatever. Now it's understandable that it is frustrating to, you know, break or whatever, and you know that's fine, but please understand that there could be a good chance that your opponent would be in a bad situation as well, and all you've done is reveal that, hey, I have a terrible hand. So if you've basically just openly told your opponent, well, I have a terrible hand, then maybe that hand trap that they were considering holding for a power card, they might just use it on your like very lackluster, I don't know, Deneb search, and then just end your turn there. The reason for that is because, well, you've just told them that you probably don't have some kind of power play or bomb card. It's very important that you kind of keep your sort of frustrations to yourself in the middle of a duel. You don't want to reveal any information whatsoever that doesn't need to be revealed. Now, of course, this can go the other way. Perhaps you are bluffing your opponent, and, you know, that's fine. That's a different topic altogether, but generally, don't reveal the truth, at least, to your opponent. At number 8, we have anecdotal evidence. Now, for those of you who don't know what anecdotal evidence means, it's basically saying that, oh, because this happened once, then therefore this is the truth. So, for example, if I was to say, I Magic Cylindered my opponent for game once, therefore Magic Cylinder is a good card and it's a staple card and it's absolutely amazing because it won me a duel. This is what anecdotal evidence is. Okay, so it's very important that we do not build our decks or make plays based on the fact that maybe it has happened to us once before. Just because you attacked your opponent for game when they had 4 back row doesn't mean that you can go crazy and play into 4 back row next time, because chances are that you could be like fucked by a generic trap card and maybe those 4 cards were bluffs. Do you understand what I'm saying? And also another point to mention as well is that a lot of people will sometimes say like, oh well, you know, I've won like a regional once, therefore I'm a good player. It's very likely that maybe if someone isn't consistently doing well at Yu-Gi-Oh! And they just have this one credential, perhaps they just got lucky on that day. So, you know, you might have a friend and you think of them as a very amazing duelist, but are they really? Or is it perhaps just the Babe Ruth fallacy where maybe they did well once and didn't really do anything again after that? Now for number 7 we have terrible siding. Siding is probably one of the biggest problems in Yu-Gi-Oh! That players just get wrong so often, and it's probably not talked about as much as it should be. I promise you I'll definitely be doing a video on siding at some point when I get round to it, but generally just think about this, okay? Even if you 2-0 or get 2-0'd by your opponent, you still played one of your games with the option to side. So even just considering games that are only two duels long, there's a very high chance that you probably should have learned how to side, because 50% of your games are played with a side deck. Now if you go further than that and think about game 3, well, now you kind of come to the realization that 2/3 of all of your duels in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are played with a side deck. That is so much of your games played with siding into consideration. And very few people actually kind of just sit down and think about their side deck. They kind of just find a few good cards and like, okay, this will probably do against this matchup. It's extremely important that you learn how to side and learn how to side for which matchups correctly. Because, like I just said, so many of your games are played with siding, and it's a very, very incremental part of the game. It's also very important that you plan your side deck accordingly. If I'm going against this matchup, then I need these cards going first, and then going second, I would need these cards. For example, sometimes people would do something like, I don't know, let's say we're playing against Burning Abyss. Oh, Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. That's a good card against Burning Abyss, right? Sure, if you're going first and you open the floodgate, that can generally just shut them down. However, if you're going second, that's probably not a card that you want to side. Floodgates generally aren't very good going second, so take that in consideration when you're building your side deck. Going first and going second are very important factors that people completely ignore when siding, and you need to keep this in mind when you are designing your deck. And number 6, we have Raigeki. I can just hear the jimmies being rustled as we speak. Raigeki, Raigeki. So many people just play this card in their deck randomly as like the 41st card or just whatever in any deck whatsoever. Just throw in a Raigeki. Twin Twisters kind of comes under this category as well. But let's be real, okay? Raigeki. It's a very, very strong card. Destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Seems really good, right? But, you know, it's 2018, and sometimes board wiping your opponent isn't even that good. And that's assuming the conditions for Raigeki being good have been filled. Like, for example, going second, or going second against a deck that doesn't have any kind of floaters, or going second against a deck that doesn't have any sort of negates. I generally believe that Raigeki is nothing more than a side deck card. Too many people play this in decks that don't even need it. I remember recently we did a table 500 with Madolche and even Volcanics. And these are not really good decks, but they don't need Raigeki. Volcanics literally have, like, Raigeki the deck as their engine. Madolche has the most powerful boss monster, potentially, in, like, you know, pre-power creeped Yu-Gi-Oh! It's very important to take into consideration, you know, what can my deck do? Do I actually care about blowing up my opponent's field, or does my engine deal with problem monsters? Yes, of course, Inspector Border, Vanity's Fiend, Majesty's Fiend, these kind of cards are problems, but they are not meta cards and they are not very relevant at the moment. So at best, you may be wanting to side deck for them if you ever come up against those matchups, and only if you're going second. Like, what are you going to do going first with a Raigeki? Just, like, hold it in your hand and say, well, next turn you're screwed, duelist. And number 5, we have Hating Pot of Desires. We could do an entire, like, documentary on this one card, but basically, if you're not playing Pot of Greed in your deck, what are you doing, okay? Now, I understand a lot of decks genuinely can't play Pot of Desires because there are just so many combo pieces inside the deck that need to be there present at all times, but generally, drawing 2 cards while sacrificing 10 from your deck that you weren't even going to draw anyway is generally going to be worth it. You want to see this card as often as possible. And yes, drawing Desires off of Desires is extremely infuriating, but the mathematical chance of this happening is extremely low. So don't think about that. Remember what we said about anecdotal evidence? Just because you maybe drew Pot of Desires off Desires doesn't mean that it's wrong to play less than 3. Now, of course, again, like I just want to reiterate, I understand some decks cannot play Pot of Desires. Just very quickly thinking about it, you know, maybe like Volcanics. You need your scatter shots in your deck, and you cannot banish even one of them. That's an example of a deck that probably can't play the Pot of Desires. I would maybe argue you can, but let's not go into detail about that. The point is, it's a draw 2. It's extremely powerful. Let's not care about those cards in our deck that we probably weren't going to draw anyway. And next we have refusing to take criticism. I've seen so many people at locals go up to people and just be like, hey, can you give me some advice on my deck? And then you go through their deck and you like say, oh, maybe you shouldn't play this, maybe you should take this out, maybe you should run this card, and they're just like, nah, but I like it and it won me a game. Generally, these are the kind of excuses that people give when they refuse to take criticism. Don't take it as a personal attack. Worst case scenario, even if it is a personal attack, so what? You know, at least you're learning and you're potentially getting some advice and new kind of perspectives on your deck that you probably wouldn't have seen before from just yourself. This is why having friends in different kind of testing circles is really important to really improving yourself at Yu-Gi-Oh! Making sure that you can let other people critique your deck and your misplays, and then you can learn from it and go from there. And next we have not reading. I'm guilty of this as well, because sometimes I just see like some generic terrible card that has like 5 million words on it, and I'm just like, I just don't have time for this. I don't care. Just tell me what it does. And then your opponent explains it, but then maybe your opponent's just most likely inadvertently cheating. Not because of any particular malicious intention. Maybe they just didn't really realize how exactly the card worked. Maybe they didn't realize that it was a hard once per turn. Very little minor things that you can only really see if you properly read the card and check the PSCT. Even cards that you think you know, It's very important to read them anyway, just because, like I said, there could be some very minor PSET issue that you kind of just missed, and it's important to see, you know, maybe this card just has like a little clause here that actually completely changes my line of play. Perhaps you need to check, does this card maybe have a graveyard effect as well? Can this card be targeted? Can this monster even be destroyed? These are all things that you just need to double check. It's not hard to just quickly skim over a card, and I know it's very tempting to just not be bothered and be lazy and be like, just ask your opponent, okay, what does that do? Deal with it yourself, okay? Read it, and then go from there. For this one, I like to call it Whack-A-Mole Yu-Gi-Oh! Basically, it's whenever you can activate a card, you just simply flip it. So for example, my opponent summons a monster, Bottomless. They try and summon another monster, Torrential. They set a back row, MST. These are the kind of things that bad players tend to do. Sometimes it's very optimal to just hold a card. Maybe you need that Torrential for the next turn when they try and push for game. Maybe you can use it on your own turn by triggering something that you have that floats. These are all the different kinds of avenues that you should probably consider before you activate a card. Now obviously this goes both ways, and you don't want to be holding a card for too long because then you'll just be dead by the time it can actually resolve. But just think ahead a little bit more. The best way to duel is just envision what your opponent's hand is. If you Torrential now, will they have a follow-up? Do you know what the follow-up could be? Is there a specific win condition that you're aware of in their deck that you can stop with a clutch Torrential? This is just a very, very specific example, but it goes with many cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like board wipes, like back row removal. Try and think about these in context of the duel itself and not just turn after turn. Sometimes it's very easy to get trapped in this mindset of what's going to happen this turn, but remember, you're not trying to win the battle, you're trying to win the war. Generally, holding cards for critical moments is better than just activating them at any opportunity when possible. Now before we get to the final spot, I'd just like to quickly shout out to my Patreon and all my patrons for helping keep the channel alive and contributing and keeping these terribly generic videos going. So I'd really appreciate any kind of support there, and you guys are really awesome for helping out. And finally, probably the biggest sign that you are a dreadful Yu-Gi-Oh! Player. Blaming everyone and anything but yourself. I got sacked. My opponent topped this. I didn't draw this card. You probably have an image of someone in your head already as soon as I said that, I guarantee it. There is always that one guy at locals, whatever, who just has an excuse for everything. I understand that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a card game and there is a degree of luck involved, but please understand that if you're constantly having to blame luck or saying you didn't draw this card, then maybe your deck isn't very good. Maybe you need to consider trying different plays. It's very unlikely that tournament after tournament after tournament you keep scrubbing out because of luck. There is a bit of luck in Yu-Gi-Oh! But understand that even you can get lucky, so think about the number of times that you sacked your opponent. It's probably 50-50. The best way to deal with any loss is to just pick up your pieces and just think to yourself, okay, what could I have done differently? Because I guarantee you, in every single duel, in every single situation, in every line of play, there is always, almost always, something you could have done differently. Whether it was just a minor sort of combo interaction that you missed, perhaps it was something that your opponent did that you kind of didn't really focus on, there is almost always some kind of other path that you could have taken. So there you have it, 10 signs that you could potentially just suck at this game. Now again, I just want to reiterate, everything has a context and you do have to take everything with a pinch of salt and not always at face value, so just kind of apply them logically to where you think you see fit. So if you see anything else maybe that wasn't included, then perhaps leave a comment down below, let me know what it is. Shoutouts. Do comment, like, and subscribe, share if you really enjoyed it, and until next time, farewell.